The American church really is gay.
Are you asking me out on a date?
Effeminate.
The Bible appears more to whisper when it comes to sexual sin.
Shallow.
I said, I want the African American 7.
And full of cowardly leaders.
Are we going to keep bickering over secondary issues?
America desperately needs to return to the Father. Either we fall on the rock and are broken, or we fall on the ground and are crushed under that rock. To fall on top of the rock and be broken is exactly the condition in which God brings reformation and revival. So which way is it, Prodigal America? Are you coming home to the Father? Join us this Reformation Day in Fort Worth, Texas, October 31st through November 2nd at Will Rogers Event Center, just days before our presidential election. And join with the thousands of us for the blessing of gathering together with God's people and celebrating God's goodness with beer and psalms. Hear from speakers such as Dr. James White, Pastor Toby Sumter, Pastor Doug Wilson, Dr. George Grant, Gaben Knox, Steve Dace, and more. Don't forget our Business Makers Conference, Jumpy Castles for the kiddos, after parties, single events, the Pastor's Luncheon, the Business Leaders Luncheon, and many more surprises coming. America has squandered her inheritance far too long. It's time she repents and returns home to her Father. Fight, Laugh, Feast presents Prodigal America. Hey y'all, welcome to Cross Politics on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network. I think we're the only Christian political show that keeps venturing back into these kind of topics.
Oh yeah?
I don't know any other show.
What are we talking about today?
We're
Please
talking
say
about
ticks. Please say ticks.
We're talking about the hero, the tick.
Oh my goodness.
So you guys have been out at studio, at different times this last month, several times. I'm catching up on all the gifts that people have been sending us.
Oh, you've been saving them up for us.
Yeah, I've been saving it up. I haven't even worn this yet. Okay, this comes from Kingsman Caps LLC. Dear Pastor Toby Chalk Knox and Gabe the Water Boy, on behalf of the Kingsman Caps, we want to express our heartfelt gratitude for the opportunity to showcase our first ever hat release on Cross Politic.
Oh. A hat release.
A hat release.
Who knew that was even a thing?
Yeah.
These are actually nice.
Oh, that's kind of fancy.
Y'all can send us gifts anytime you like.
Take the cardboard out of that one.
What is it called?
Kingsman.
And, your support and platform have provided us with an incredible avenue to reach a genuine audience, and we're truly honored to be featured on your esteemed show. To show our appreciation, we are delighted to offer all your listeners a 10% discount. Ooh, I didn't even know they were going to do that. On their purchases using the code CrossPolitic10. Oh, don't put a number in there. CrossPolitic10, it looks like to me. 10.
Are your eyes getting bad?
I need reading glasses. Oh my goodness. I'm 45. It's just.
Oh my.
We founded Kingsman Caps with the vision of creating premium headwear that glorifies God and helps grow his kingdom one at a time. We want to spread the message that Christ is king to the whole world. Our mission is to produce Christian headwear that stands out both in quality and design. In other words, Christian headwear that doesn't suck.
This isn't a hat. This is a crown.
This is a crown. No, literally.
Thanks for helping us share this vision with your audience and for your unwavering commitment to spreading the message of Christ in everything you do. Humbly, respectfully, Justin and Johnny.
Thank you, Justin.
What's their website?
Johnny.
Kingsman Caps. They didn't put their website in here.
Well, Google it.
Kingsman Caps. So, Kings.
Get that 10% off.
M-E-N.
Get you a crown.
All right.
M-E-N. There you go.
Kepler is an online marketplace for classical Christian education that assures parents maintain their agency without forfeiting the assistance and expertise of qualified conservative Christian teachers. Kepler offers university model courses in the classical tradition that fit your schedule and budget. Visit www.kepler.education. That's kepler.education, and use their simple search tool to find the course and teacher that meets your child's needs, or simply ask for help to get assistance from a real human being. Kris Newby is an award-winning science writer and the senior producer of the Lyme disease documentary Under Our Skin. Ooh, makes me shiver. She has 2 degrees in engineering, a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah, and a master's degree from Stanford University. Previously, Newby worked for Stanford University, Apple, and other Silicon Valley companies, and she is the author of the award-winning 2019 book, Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. Kris, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic.
Thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome.
She's already she's like,
we hope
what did I get into? Thank you.
Venture into discussions on politics.
Well,
everything's political now.
Yeah, let's do this.
Political.
So, your book, Bitten, and in your documentary, you discuss the origins of Lyme disease and possible connections with ticks being turned into Cold War bioweapons. Please explain.
In 10 words or less.
Go ahead.
I said in 10 words or less.
Yeah, so Bitten is the history of the military's tick weaponization program. And it's mostly told through the words and the lab notebooks and the writings of the guy who discovered Lyme disease, Willy Bergdorfer. And he was the guy called on site to investigate this crazy outbreak that began in the late 60s around Lyme, Connecticut and Long Island, New York. And Willie admitted to me at a certain point that he weaponized bugs. The military was stuffing fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes with various combinations of bacteria and toxins and viruses. And the idea was the perfect stealth weapon. You would make them infectious. You would drop these bugs on enemies and they would creep around. There are no fingerprints on them. Kevlar vests won't protect people from these organisms, and it would disable the enemy population. Yeah, this program ended in 1972.
So what war did we begin to use? I guess we would fly over a nation and drop bugs on them?
Well, the rumors are that we used it in Korea. And the pilots who flew over Korea claimed that they dropped infected bugs and turkey feathers dusted with cholera on the Koreans. When they came back to the States, the military said, well, they were brainwashed and they just made all that stuff up. Then I started researching in 1951 after World War II, and I followed Willy Bergdorfer's work in bioweapons. He worked on bioweapons for over a decade, and he was developing combination bug bacteria combos that would not stand out in Vietnam, in Cuba, and Korea too.
Well, so Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, our friend, he endorsed. I mean, he said some really gracious things about your book. He was impressed with your book. He one of his comments was the mid-20th century U.S. biomedical research establishment was psychopathic, wholeheartedly embracing reckless, deadly investigations in the name of developing vaccines and bioweapons. How did that happen, Kris?
Well, after World War II, the U.S. interviewed German and Japanese prisoners of war scientists, and they realized they had really extensive biological weapons programs. They were paranoid that the Russians would do the same thing. So we started this nuclear arms race, chemical arms race, and the biological weapons arms race. And it was the ends justify the means. Mm-hmm. The process for weaponizing these things took years. Willy Bergdorfer would do feasibility studies. The Pentagon would give them instructions like, okay, we want a tick that can survive in Siberia. So they picked and we want another tick that lives in the jungles of Vietnam. So Willy would work on feasibility studies. He'd throw it to the biological weapons headquarters in Fort Detrick, Maryland. They would do larger pilot studies. Then they would do large scale pilot studies in Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah, like dumping 600,000 fleas and seeing how far they would hop in the desert. On and on like that.
Oh my goodness.
So is this kind of like a little bit like the Wuhan thing where they're doing research and the research
like gain of function type stuff, and
but the research kind of gets out to the public and then gets people sick,
and then actually gets people sick.
Is this the same kind of situation where we're like, okay, we're developing this, biomedical
tick warfare thing, and then it gets into the population here in the U.S. Is that same scenario?
Yeah, in the book, I document several feasibility pilot studies done on American soil. Sometimes those bugs got out, and so I document a certain number of those that we know. For example, they took tularemia, tick-borne tularemia, and sprayed it over parts of Alaska. The most outrageous experiment I heard about was in coastal Virginia near Newport News. They took hundreds of thousands of Lone Star ticks. Those are ticks that previously, before these open air experiments, were mostly in Texas, south of the Mason-Dixon line, and they released them. They made them radioactive first so they could track them with Geiger counters. And then they would measure how far they would creep or fly on birds for months to years. And they needed to know that because if they dropped these ticks on Russia or wherever, how far would the diseases spread? So the problem with that is Lone Star ticks are an invasive species for that area. And they did these experiments on the Atlantic bird flyway, where, these coastal birds go from South America up through the Caribbean, up through the United States to Canada. So the ticks were spread that way. And the local tick populations in 72 were suppressed because of DDT. And so these invasive ticks sort of took over, and they carried new diseases like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and this horrible thing you probably heard of, red meat allergy, alpha-gal.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
I've heard of that.
Have you?
Yeah.
That must be a Northeast thing.
I know. But
it's only recently recognized in the 80s. And a bite from these Lone Star ticks, they have a white dot on their back, the adults, so they look like Lone Stars.
Yeah.
And plus they were found in Texas originally, but they bite you and the saliva creates an allergic reaction that can last for months to forever. And it makes you allergic to this certain carbohydrate in red meat. Yeah. So what happens is you eat a juicy burger on the grill, and about 5 hours later in the middle of the night, you might be vomiting, feel ill, break out in hives. Some people end up in the ICU. And so that's a new problem caused by these Lone Star ticks that were released. And soon after the series of experiments happened, there was a huge Rocky Mountain spotted fever outbreak around Long Island, New York. That's when the Lyme outbreak happened. So the question is, when these supposedly clean ticks were released, did they have other diseases from other countries in them?
Kris. just
Sorry.
Hey, sis.
You were having a good day, weren't you?
I was. The only thing this hat is missing is aluminum foil inside.
To protect you.
Just so you know, something about me, I tend to live in a world where I wear aluminum foil on my head constantly. So it seems like, though, you're telling me that all the reasons that I would do that are pretty valid right now. Because I don't understand how you found all of this out. This seems like how did you even begin to notice that, they're weaponizing ticks?
So it was based on interviews with people that were part of that program. So Willy Bergdorfer, who worked for Rocky Mountain Labs, now an NIH lab, was doing these basically gain of function experiments. They were mixing bacteria and viruses in ticks to get the most lethal or incapacitating version of that microbe that could be then weaponized. And then I talked to a CIA dark ops agent who dropped infected ticks on Cuba. And his statements were backed up by Operation Mongoose CIA documents that were released in 2017 through 2019 in the JFK assassination files.
Wow.
So these are very, very dark experiments. And then I spoke with Jim Oliver, who worked for Dietrich on the tick weaponization program.
Okay.
He was Georgia Southern.
Okay, so then how lethal is because it seems like this has a long-term effect, not necessarily immediately. You get bit and you die or you turn into a zombie, right? So how lethal was this program, and why did they shut it down?
Nixon shut down the whole program in 1972. The ironic thing is he came into office in 1969. A lot of bad stuff was happening then. The Vietnam War, in that year, or the year before, it was the RFK Jr. and the Martin Luther King assassinations. He had a lot of stuff on his desk. And then there was this huge chemical weapons accident in Utah where 6,000 sheep died. So he needed to get some of that off his desk. And that's the time he says, okay, we're canceling the biological weapons program as of 1972.
Okay. And then why are they trying these on their own people?
Well, they thought they were safe, but there's a lot of people in the pipeline in developing biological weapons. There's a lot of leak points. And then sometimes they did the experiments where they thought, well, there's nobody around here. Like in Skull Valley, Utah, they experimented with the fleas. They experimented with an incapacitating agent called Venezuelan equine encephalitis that would make humans supposedly mildly ill. In the middle of the desert. Oh, there's only Native Americans out there. Who cares? And with the mosquito experiments, they used the Egypti mosquito, which is a tropical mosquito, and they dropped them on poor Black neighborhoods in Georgia and Florida, uninfected, but just to see how far the mosquitoes would spread. But again, those are non-native mosquitoes that carry stuff like Zika and dengue, bad diseases. And so they would have like CDC people or military people disguised as public health workers. I said, have you had an unusual amount of mosquitoes this week? And collecting samples from little boxes. So it was all stealth, and they're just in the 50s and 60s. They were after the commies, and there was no ethical oversight.
So this is like the Tuskegee Project too. They're doing the same thing there. Same
brilliant Pentagon minds.
Oh my goodness. So
go ahead.
So you published this book in 2019, Kris, and then 2020 we suddenly start hearing rumors of this Wuhan virus, COVID-19. What did you think? I mean, given all this background, like what did you think? And was there sort of a progression of what you have thought about all of this?
Well, when it came out in 2019, May, we couldn't send out advance copies through HarperCollins because it was a sensitive subject and we didn't want it to get killed before it was released.
Right.
Then the sales were boosted because Chris Smith, the Republican congressman from New Jersey, read it, and he was on the DOD budget committee. And he got up on C-SPAN, which everybody watches because it's the biggest piggy bank in the world, the DOD budget. And he waved it in front of C-SPAN and said, this book is incredible. It's well cited. And if the U.S. truly did release weaponized bugs in the U.S., we need to investigate it and do mitigation, much like Agent Orange damages or, the nuclear fallout. So then it became sort of an international laughing stock because people said, well, weaponized ticks, that's ridiculous. Right. The government would never lie to us. 7 months later, the COVID thing happened.
Yeah.
And then no one cared about my book. But as the Wuhan lab leaks revelations come out, then people are coming back to it saying, well, maybe she isn't just a crazy person making stuff up. Yeah. Uh-huh. So the book sales, and I'm getting more speaking engagements because people just want to know more. Like if they did this with the COVID-19, would they do it with the insects? And the thing about the insects is it has a long lasting effect on human and animal and environmental health. It's not just humans. I call it the American Chernobyl because these lone stars, for example, keep spreading. They're up in Canada now and across the Great Lakes, not the Great Lakes state, the Tennessee, that sort of thing. They're moving in all directions from Virginia coast.
I honestly, just being honest, I don't know if I would have gotten Kris on if it wasn't for COVID.
Yeah.
No, that's what I was going to ask. So when COVID happened, did you say, listen, I tried to tell y'all? Was there any, what was your response to the moment of COVID? Did you believe everything that was going down around right away? Like, no, this is a problem. Or did you say, no, I want to investigate this a little more? Like, did you have red flags during COVID?
I said, told you so. I just said to my friends, well, Lyme disease was a preview for what happened on COVID. And I actually filed Freedom of Information request to see what was going on in the NIH.
Yep.
My book was released. And at first, the NIH scientists, before they read the book, they called me a liar, liar, pants on fire.
Yeah.
But then once they read the book, they said, oh, we better meet with legal. And then they drafted responses to the congressman who did queries about it. And I think they just decided, let's go radio silence. Plus, that's when the COVID stuff started leaking in the fall.
Right.
And the thing I noticed is the ghostwriter who wrote for Fauci the response to the Lyme disease thing was the same person that did damage control for the lab leak theories.
Wow.
So Lyme disease, they practiced.
It was a practice run for COVID.
Kris, what?
Hold on. No. I got to ask this, and I'll let you go after.
Go ahead.
Do you think that we are, lab leak, that doesn't seem nefarious, right? That doesn't seem like, somebody's intending to.
It was an accident.
It was an accident, right? And then, so they were just trying to figure out how to weaponize something, and whether it's ticks or whether it's the Wuhan virus, whatever, was an accident. But the way that you're researching this, do you think there's another play beyond even COVID?
I don't know. There's the whole shadow government theory and profiteering off of disease, and I haven't found proof of that. I have friends who think that. I can just go where the evidence leads.
Yeah.
But the main problem for me is that we're doing these dangerous gain of function experiments that started in the 50s and seem to continue under the ruse that, we're just trying to protect the American people. But if you read this book, let's see, Pandora's Gamble by Alison Young, it's a succinct history of many lab leaks, and these people are not protecting us.
Yeah.
Because there's so many bioweapons labs now, a lot of leak points, a lot of, like a lab tech who has a hangover who comes in the morning and drops a vial. It's just, we need fewer people looking into this stuff, more ethical oversight.
Wow.
So, Kris, it seems to me, I was kind of halfway joking, but I've always been skeptical of our government for the most part, for various reasons. For one, because my Christian faith teaches me not to put faith in men, not to put faith in large bureaucracies. But I'd say COVID really kind of amped up those hairs that stand up in your back when you sense something's wrong.
Might never go down.
Yours is constantly. You wake up and they're like,
it's just up, yeah.
But it seems to me the problem here is that people have maybe too good of faith in others or too good of faith in our government that
assume everyone's going to be good. Everybody has their best interest in mind.
And even if it's an accident, they're like, "Oh, it's an accident," even though they're lied to about the accident or whatever. I don't really. I guess this is more of a comment, but it seems like that's part of the problem is that citizens are not responsible or not being responsible enough to do some of their own due diligence to kind of sort through this information,
hold people accountable.
Well, I think it's hard to know who's telling the truth right now.
Yeah.
Because I found the media is in the pocket of the government.
Yeah.
Like as soon as Chris Smith held up the book, there was an op-ed in the Washington Post that basically said everything in my book was conspiracy theory from an academic who didn't disclose that he was taking millions to do biosecurity at a biolevel 4 lab in Massachusetts, not disclosed. And I called him up right after this 1,000-word op-ed and said, hey, professor, there are several inaccuracies about that. Did you read my book? And he goes, no, I didn't read it. I don't have time to read. So he basically reviewed my book, linked to my marketing page, and had never read the book. And
Wow.
said, can I send you a book so we can correct some of these things? And some of the things he said are just on Wikipedia. It's not any of the secret stuff that I dug up.
Wow.
And he said, well, you could send me a book, but I'll just shred it. So
Man.
this is an academic researcher highly funded by the NIH and the military-industrial complex. And he felt impervious to anything I might say or do. He was protected. So that was a big red pill moment for me.
Wow.
Where the Washington Post and the New York Times would be truthful and fact check things, but they didn't. I mean, I called the science editor and she goes, oh, we don't fact check op-eds. Well, that's not what RFK Jr. told me when he did an op-ed there. So there's a double standard there.
Wow.
Bitten. Kris, tell everybody where they can get your book at.
So HarperCollins site, Amazon, though I love to support indie bookstores too, so don't ignore them. And then I have a lot of images and documents that I base my book on my krisnewby.com site. I also have a Substack under my name where I'm rolling out the evidence that didn't make it into the book, and that I continue to investigate the origins of Lyme disease. And then tell everybody to do tick checks. And if you pull out an embedded tick, send it in for testing. That's my advice.
Thank you, Kris, very much.
Thank you, Kris.
Appreciate your time and appreciate all your work on this.
But wait, there's more. We're going to take a commercial break. I don't think this show is completely done yet. We want to wrap up. I want to think through some of this stuff and have some application because all my hairs are getting longer on the back of my neck. All right, we'll go to break and we'll come back.
We're going to shave Knox's back at break. Welcome back to Cross Politic.
How you feeling, Gabe?
That interview didn't help me.
We are so screwed. That's my post-meal side talking. And you know what? I think we deserve it.
What's your pre-meal side saying?
We never had a chance.
Knox got a pre-meal on the post.
We never had a chance.
No, I was actually thinking, I mean, God sends bugs on nations.
Oh, dude.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. Nope. Go ahead.
I'm
Preach,
just saying, like, God,
Preach. Like we never seen this before.
Yeah, I mean, God does this. I mean,
through humans.
Yeah,
we're calling magic.
I mean, he
magic bugs into the place.
He does it however he wants to do it. But one of the ways he judges nations. I mean, sometimes. I mean, we don't know all the factors in, like, the locusts on Egypt and the gnats in Egypt
and the frogs.
Yeah, I mean, God could have used other means to cause all these swarms to land on Egypt.
Yeah.
But
boils,
yeah.
But he let the magicians.
Yeah, remember the magicians? They were able to make more frogs.
Yeah. They couldn't get rid of them.
They couldn't get rid of them.
Right.
But they could make them.
which is pretty silly. It's like here's Moses making frogs, and they're like, we can do the same thing.
And Pharaoh's like, okay, and his heart is hardened.
Yeah.
But God also, one of the judgments that God gives people over to is madness.
Yeah.
A kind of madness. Romans 1, you deny the creator, you serve the creation. And I think in serving the creation, you become arrogant and prideful, and because there's nothing above you. You are God. I mean, that's what idolatry is always ultimately a kind of like mirror. You're worshiping yourself.
Yeah.
You have this madness. It turns into a sexual madness that's suicidal and fruitless, homosexuality and all the rest of it.
Yep.
But it's also the madness of like killing your own babies.
Right.
Like the madness of killing your own fruit.
That's right.
But if you're that kind of mad and that kind of arrogant, well, of course you're going to experiment on people.
Yeah.
Of course you're gonna, in your arrogance, say, I can do whatever I want with human life. And maybe it's also the arrogance of, all through the Old Testament, Israel, they're warned over and over again not to look to man to save them from their enemies.
That's right.
Right? You see Babylon, do not fear Babylon. You see, don't fear. You see Assyria, do not fear them. Don't go to Egypt. And they're like, but Egypt's got big chariots.
Right.
And God says, if you go to Egypt, you're dead. And like, but but I think there's something about that, like in the Cold War, like they're like, but they've got nukes.
Yeah.
They got ticks, Lord.
They're experimenting on bugs and they're doing this. We've got to make sure we can match it.
By the way, just notice this though.
Yeah.
This is after you've won.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Right, like
but no.
You technically, after you get done and you see that the other side is,
World War II.
Sure, okay,
but the commies, they were just rising.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's true. That's when we're going into Red Scare. That's when we're going into
you're right.
The Soviets.
No, that's true.
Cold War, and
but some of this is like after that's all over. You got this in the 50s, and they're still going.
But Kris is referencing. You've got, Korea.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's
Vietnam, I assume.
And remember, all of this behind the scenes is that's communism.
Yeah, but my point is,
and Cuba.
No, I agree, but my point is that Israel wins without having the best army. Israel wins not because they had chariots. God is telling them this. Like, you don't win because you have chariots. I'm the one who fights for you. Don't you ever forget that, right? Make the sound, I'll come down, remember my promise, covenant with your people, and I'll fight for you. Here we are, we win wars. We didn't win it because we had the best wars, the best technology, all this. We won even the first war that establishes this country, right? But then we don't trust in the God who's given us the victory of these wars, and we start saying, "Oh my goodness, look what they have."
Yeah. But Knox, when's the last time, especially after World War II, you heard our leaders say that?
No, that's true.
Because I'll tell you what. You know what we say? We have the best military in the world.
That's right.
Don't mess with America.
That's right.
We got the biggest guns. We got the biggest guns.
We will level you. It's like, not God, dude.
Right.
No, that's right.
That's our arrogance.
Yeah. That's right.
But notice that, the difference. Go back to the beginning. I think that's a pretty marked difference from after the War for Independence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
After the War for
They're
Independence,
all grateful to God.
George Washington and the other leaders of our country said this was a gift from God. Even the most
Benjamin Franklin,
Benjamin Franklin, the deists, and Thomas Jefferson are like clearly the hand of providence. Delivered us. Like even the non-Christians,
because we had pitchforks and they had muskets.
They saw because we went up against the biggest military in the world.
Right.
That's right.
America did.
Yes.
And everybody said, "Thank God." God delivered us.
Yeah.
God saved us. But after World War II, whatever Christian remnants we still had that were part of our instincts of justice and so on, we didn't say that.
But this is striking because we have not been thankful to God for a long time. I look back, or at least this is how my American cultural upbringing makes me think about the past here. I look at the the good old days is the 1920s, 30s, of course,
FDR?
Not FDR. But
Woodrow Wilson?
We look back at that kind of that 20s through kind of 50s as kind of like a good moral America.
Well,
like 50s was,
not all of us.
I'm just saying that's kind of like, I would say probably the general impression of
that's the closest living memory that we have of things being better than what they are now.
The families were intact, the nuclear family, all that stuff. The nuclear family was emphasized in politics, all that stuff. But all these tests, all these bugs were being let out into the population during that time period.
Right. 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s. We had
and before that,
Margaret Sanger, 1916.
Yeah,
right?
Margaret Sanger. When was
Tuskegee Project?
Tuskegee, that was 1920s, 30s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was 30s.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think
so. The Tuskegee Institute,
you've got Sanger, Tuskegee Project,
Institute,
and then you've got
bug tests going on in the 40s and 50s
and 60s. Yeah. I mean that's
so we've been like rejecting God for a long time, and that's a period where I don't
1932 is
I don't look back in the 1950s like a period that we rejected God. I don't look like
instinctively,
right? But apparently, like if we're doing this kind of stuff, we're rejecting God.
But remember, as Eisenhower in the 50s it says, I don't care which God you believe in, just as long as you believe in some God.
Right.
That was what, and you know why? I mean, you know why they put "In God We Trust"
on the coin.
In God in the pledge. Under God is because the commies were atheists.
Right.
But the God that they were...
And they thought they were fighting atheism by putting in God in the pledge.
But as Eisenhower said, I don't care what God it is, so long as it's a God.
And see, this is what you were just talking about, Pastor. I want to try and take in... We just had a celebration of life here recently this
June
week.
Life Month.
And,
the anniversary of Dobbs.
And you just made me write down something that I think is really important in this whole conversation, which is I wish we can start seeing that our sin is worship to false gods, and false gods are cruel.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me that in the light of this celebration of life, right, because we see Roe v. Wade fall, that people are out there protesting the idea that we want to see babies live.
Yeah.
And they're out there cursing at children.
Right.
They're out there basically saying we want to kill little innocent children in the most protected place.
I saw those pictures. That Daniel Fukushima posted.
Glorious.
Of all these kids.
It's amazing.
Around the protesters.
Out of the mouth of babes, right?
I mean, and it was like, oh, Lord. That's beautiful.
It was.
Because they're saying, you want to kill us.
Yeah.
Who do you want to kill? Who do you want the right?
We would have killed you if you're in your mom's womb.
Yeah, right.
Right there.
It's these children, these young people standing up and saying, no, that's wicked. That's wrong. It's evil. I'm thinking about you say that idols are always harsh.
Yeah, they're cruel
to their people.
Cruel.
One of the most glorious illustrations in the Gospels of this juxtaposition. Is Herod.
Yes.
And the Gospels put these two stories together, but you've got Herod, and he has this, he has John the Baptist in prison.
Yeah.
And remember, John the Baptist is preached against Herod's
marriage.
Yeah, the wife saying, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife.
Yep.
And she's out for John the Baptist, and he's kind of protecting
John
him.
the Baptist preaching theonomy.
Yeah. And remember, the daughter comes and dances for the people, and he says, "I'll give you anything," and she comes back and says, "I would like the head of John the Baptist on a platter."
Yeah.
And because of the people that are around him, Herod orders it. John the Baptist is beheaded. His head is brought in on a plate.
On a food dish.
The very next story in the Gospels, you have Jesus. He goes into a deserted place, presumably because his cousin's dead.
Yeah, he's mourning. He's mourning his cousin's death.
Well, he can't get away from the crowds. The crowds surround him.
Yep.
And Jesus says to the disciples, and the disciples say, "There's so many people here. It's dinner time. We better send them away." And Jesus says, "No, you give them something to eat."
That's right.
And of course they have the, what are we going to do? And says, what do you have? Bread and fishes. He multiplies the bread and the fishes. Jesus has compassion on his people and he feeds his people.
That's right.
Wicked rulers feed on their people.
That's right.
Use bugs, whatever.
Yeah. And good shepherds
feed their people.
Amen. And Jesus is, of course, also, he tells his disciples, he doesn't just say, look, I got it, guys. He says, you feed them. And that's part of what he's there directing us to be those kind of shepherds. Yeah. We need to be people who trust God. And this goes back to trusting God. It's like the disciples say we don't have enough.
You aren't trusting God.
The American, our leaders said we don't have enough. Yeah. We can't go up against Russia. We can't go up against the Soviet Union. We can't go up against the commies. We've got to keep up with them.
Right.
And Jesus says, what do you got?
Yep.
I can multiply that.
Yep.
And feed your people rather than feed on your people.
And this is why, not to self-promote, but this is why I think our Prodigal America conference is so important.
Yeah.
It's Psalm 20.
Yeah.
Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we trust in the Lord our God.
Yeah.
And we're doing it days before the presidential election. We don't trust in Trump. We don't trust in Biden. We know God is in control of this crazy story that we're in. I mean, growing up in the 80s, growing up in the 90s, growing up in a time where a woman couldn't identify as a man or it wasn't socially acceptable for a man to, it's like we're in clown car. We're on a clown bus. We aren't even on a clown car. We're on a clown bus, and we're trusting and looking for all these other ways of salvation, but Christ.
Yeah, one of the things I think is important for us to remember, because when I get, because I am the kind of person that has his hair on the back of his neck that's always standing up, it's really important. It's always.
We can't even shave it after the break.
Yeah, my head is bald, but the back of my neck, not so much. It's that, I remember, Pastor, and I always bring this up, and this is my favorite line, though, is that there's always light in Goshen, right? Like when you're in the middle of Egypt and God is bringing judgment on a place, make sure that you have blood over your doorpost.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's the real situation.
Well, make sure you have Christ.
Well,
because I think there's a tendency to fear, be like, oh no, we're under judgment, as if God is going to not protect his people.
Right.
Right. I'm telling you, we have this fear that we embrace the same fear that got us into the situation right here. And when we see stuff like this, we need to repent.
Yeah.
And repent where we're at, the sins that we have in our door. Because there's something else about this. Like, these people are doing they're working in labs, and because someone has an immoral lifestyle, they're causing a havoc on the rest of society.
Chris even said that. The lab worker comes in with a hangover.
Yeah. And so now they do their job poorly.
He has sin in his life, and he's going to screw up.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why the order and the structures that God gives us is about family. How do you become a good person who's able to get office in society? Well, how does he run his family? Yeah. Are you moral there? Are you repenting of sin there? Are you able to structure your family there? Are you guys doing something of value to give to somebody else? Okay, how does this man's wife look? Okay, is she happy? Well, maybe you can have an office here now. Okay, you want to be an officer in the church? Right. What does your family look like? Yeah. This is not just an organization for how the family in the church should run. No, this is society. Right. And so if we're going to have the blessings of God, we're going to have to start there. And the blessings of God will work their way out to society. Yeah. To have people who can say, guys, we're not doing this. No, the drunk, you're fired, sir. We got people we just talked to Andrew the other day. We got people who are scared. Yeah. Right? We're fearful. People know
they're conservative at work.
So then what are they doing? Their ethics aren't even showing up then.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And so we're going to get more of this. But if we come back, repent of the places where we know we have authority at, and start working from there, God will keep us safe through the midst of all this judgment.
That's right. God's blessing was on Goshen, where his people were.
That's right.
And the corollary to that is
miles away. Pullman, 7 miles away, whatever.
Yeah, the locusts are coming, the frogs are coming. That's right. Everything. The
curses are here.
The curses are coming, and the corollary to that is that God sends his judgments with absolute precision.
Yep. Amen.
God, the exhaustive sovereignty of God extends to the ticks.
That's right.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Like he rules the fleas.
Yeah.
He rules all of them.
That's right.
And they swarm where he tells them to swarm, and where he says you may not pass.
Yeah.
They cannot pass.
That's right.
They cannot come. And God is intent on saving his people. Even in Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, remember this. Like Abraham's pleading, like, and God was like, yeah, if there's 10 righteous, I won't destroy it. For 10, he wouldn't have destroyed it.
Yep.
And even then, when there wasn't even 10, he sent angels to deliver Lot and his wife and daughters, even though his wife didn't quite make it out. But like
there's always
a little bit.
3.5 people righteous. But that's God. Like God is that kind of God. And all of this doesn't mean that we're saying, so stay home and pray.
No.
No, what we're saying is you trust God and you be obedient. Because what Kris was pointing out is that what you ultimately end up with is a kind of ends justify the means. That's where these corners get cut. It's an ends, it's like, it's because of this threat, we have to cut these corners. We have to take these risks. There's this kind of collateral damage. These are, and you end up with, people who are not as important.
Yeah. Right.
These people in South America, they don't count as much. Or these people over in these poor black communities don't count as much.
Georgia.
Or these Native Americans in the middle of Utah or whatever, like don't matter as much. But like you start saying what is more essential or not.
Yeah. Right.
That's non-essential. That's essential.
That's right.
And you start playing God. And
you come real cruel.
But faith in God says, I have limits from God. I may not play God. I must obey, even in the face of maybe there's a threat and I'm not sure how to handle this threat.
Right.
What do? Well, you do what Hezekiah did. You do what Josiah did. You go and you pour your heart out to God. You strap on your sword and you get busy with the trowel like Nehemiah did. You're busy being faithful. But not crossing the lines, not taking matters into your own hands, not grasping for the power because you're not God. That doesn't mean you do nothing. Still check your kids for ticks, man.
Yeah, of course.
But that doesn't mean that you're doing nothing. That doesn't mean you're trusting in yourself or in your methods. You're trusting in the living God.
So if you're single, get married. If you're married, have you a bunch of kids. And if you have kids, go baptize all of them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politics.